Greetings, everyone. My name is Buck Business. Konnichiwa. I'm Kawaii Critic, and today we're here to review My Little Pony Season 7, Episode 24, Uncommon Bond. We begin this episode with Starlight-san anxiously awaiting Sunburst-san, who is now visiting Ponyville for a temporary friendship lesson, if you will. So he stops on by, and they mention that they're going to do some stuff together. And then he mentions antiquing as one of the hobbies that he would like to try while he's there in Ponyville. And she was unaware that he would be interested in that, and thus they proceed to go to the shop, where from there we get a little bit of I'll say, hint of ships plural, maybe, perhaps. At any rate, yes, we do get a visit from Twilight, who also appears to like antiquing. So they are enjoying each other's company as friends in this episode, or at least in this part. While Starlight is in the back, not truly enjoying herself as much as she would like to, as she wanted to have the activities be based around their interest, particularly probably magic based. But, real magic, because later on it does become apparent that things are not as all they're cracked up to be. So anyways, after a bit of time spending with Twilight-san, we move on to the late night where Starlight-san wakes Sunburst-san up super early, and they go to this tree, and then they see Trixie-san, who mentions a little bit of magic, and of course that interests Sunburst-san. And from there, they do some practicing of the magic, and she gets stuck, and then Starlight-san has to help her. And then it's all like, oh, we gotta practice some magic. So Starlight-san is getting a little bit bored by this, or not as interested. And once again, Sunburst-san's distraction is focused on this situation. Now, his reactions to Starlight were a little bit unnecessary. He did cut her off at one point, which felt a little off, as well as just shouting out, oh, Twilight would know what to do. It seemed a little bit forced here in this episode. It just didn't feel as natural. It felt like in order to get from point A to B, the transitions were a little bit more forced in this episode, which I do think holds it back from being a great episode. It's still a good episode, but I wouldn't call it necessarily a great episode. It's mainly because of these odd choices of transitions that lead us from point A to B, and then from point B to C, which is where we end up next, which is talking with Maud and Rox. So yes, they end up in a cave, and they end up moving toward Maud, and it just so happens that the cave that Starlight-san brought her to, the mirror pool, is connected to her little rock quarry, if you will. So she's digging up some rocks, and of course, Sunburst-san takes interest in that as well. Once again, leaving Starlight-san to feel left out, and so she just sort of leaves them to do whatever. And we learn later that Sunburst-san just assumed that she stuck around and wanted to show her something, apparently. But for the time being, she ends up back in the castle, where she talks with Twilight-san some more about how their friendship isn't as strong as it used to be. And from there, Starlight mentions how they had this one game, and they played it earlier, but it didn't last too long. And it was a good moment for the three of them, that being Starlight, Sunburst, and Twilight, all to have some moment together without it feeling. That was probably the least forced obstacle in this entire episode. Was just the three of them just hanging out. It felt the most natural part of the episode, really. But beyond that, getting back to the next time, Starlight assumes that the best way to deal with this situation is to conjure up a new spell, or seems to be more of a combination of spells, more like. It seems to be a mixture of a teleportation spell or a transfer spell of some sort to get them to what appears to be Starlight's home, and then turning herself into a filly and turning him into a colt so that they can play the game as they were in their youth. Sunburst doesn't find this very fun at all. He seems to be, again, the writing is a bit off for him in this episode, it feels like, because it seems like he's just mad at her for playing the game on top of turning them into a filly and a colt, which I get getting angry at that part, but the first part doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because of the ending of the episode, where they say that, he's going about talking to the other ponies that were in the episode, and then he proceeds to make a bigger version of that said game to compensate for their current age. And yeah, these little parts just don't really fit as well as I thought they should. So it took Sunburst-san a little bit to get there. He had to talk to the others about how Trixie-san and Starlight-san had a past, and how Maud-san likes jokes, and how she mentions a joke at some point, and it all leads to the big moment where they do introduce this big version of the game, and everybody's having a good old time together now, and then they get ready to pack up or help Sunburst get ready to pack up and leave. So they do that. So Sunburst-san, who at the beginning of the episode, or during the antiquing part of the episode, brought up a sort of a crate of some sort, and Starlight-san mentions said crate, or as I compare it to a sort of a loot box, if you will, not sponsored by the way. And so Sunburst enters his little travel back, and he opens the crate to reveal a mysterious book of sorts. And that is where we end this episode, with a bit of a cliffhanger, but most of the episode was okay, but its transitions were a bit off, and some of the dialogue was also a bit off. Other than that, it was a pretty good episode. So that is our review. Stick top, ting tong tori! And if you enjoyed this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, everyone, farewell. Bye!